Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The core of human personality is Atman, which is the substratum. And what defines the human personality is the vasanas. The vasanas are beyond comprehension. You cannot understand the vasanas in its original form. Vasanas can be understood when it manifests. So, with the manifestation, we can project and understand the vasana. Whereas, with Atman, you cannot understand that at all. So, that is the difference between Atman and vasanas. Vasana manifests itself as thoughts, desires, and action, behavior. Now, the human being is a composite personality. There is no one, there are many vasanas. Therefore, at different periods of time, different vasanas will manifest through the same body. Since it is expressing through the same body, we get confused in understanding why this person is behaving like this. I thought he was like that. I never conceived that this person could be like this. Now, what we don't understand is, at that point of time, the generosity vasana was manifesting. Now, the gross miserly vasana is manifesting. Nevertheless, he has both the vasanas. So sometimes we get confused. Why is he? One side he looks so good, so genuine, so normal for all of us. Such a fantastic fellow, such a high character person. And suddenly he starts using abusive languages, bad words, swearing, all those. Now, we can't understand why he was doing. Now, what you have to understand, what Vedanta teaches here is, it is not that same person. Remember that. The manifestation is happening through that same body. That's about it. But that vasana is different, this vasana is different. So, human personality, when you want to understand, you have to understand the vasanas. But the problem is, we cannot understand the vasanas. So, the confusion comes. Now, how are we to understand a human being? That is why we go to the other aspect of a human personality, which has two dimensions, two other aspects of human personality. The self kept outside. Vasanas, directly you can understand. Therefore, keep it aside. Body, there is no point in understanding the body because it is more or less it's the same body all of us carry. So there is no way that you can understand what is that personality. So then what is left out is only two other equipments called mind and intellect. That's why throughout the scriptures, there is a lot of discussions we have only with reference to this mind and intellect. Hardly we have any reference to the analysis of the body or the analysis of the vasanas or Atman. That's our other side. Lot of material we have is on this. Now here he says, what is mind? Mind is a seat of emotions, where when this consciousness expresses at the level of mind. It experiences various emotions as a feeler. That's very simple for us to understand as of now. You don't need more than that at, at this stage. Next to aspect we have is the intellect, buddhi. That buddhi is classified into two sections. That buddhi is what we see is carrying two aspects. See the board. The intellect is divided into two, gross and subtle. Gross intellect and subtle intellect. When you are engaging your gross intellect, you are called a thinker, entertaining, thinking the thoughts of the world. When you are engaging the subtle intellect, you are referred as contemplator, thinking on the thoughts of reality. This is gross intellect and subtle intellect. Now, first you need to understand what is intellect. Because you have to go from the basics. Intellect means the discriminating faculty. It's just discriminates this is different from that. That capacity to recognize this is different, that is different. That's called buddhi. That this is it. Now remember, buddhi is not equivalent to concluding anything, please. It says this is different, that is different. That discrimination when you are doing within the terrestrial world, within the pairs of opposites within the world, saying this is different, that is different. That's all it is. Nothing more than that. You understand a square is different from a circle. A square is different from a rectangle. You understand the difference, isn't it? From your ability to discriminate between a master and a stranger by the dog, that is also buddhi only. It's able to understand the difference. But its ability to recognize the difference is so limited. For all practical purpose, we say animals don't have buddhi. They don't have intellect. Right? It is rudimentary intellect, what they have. Now, you can't say it is zero. You can't say that animals have, zero intellect. But we say for all practical purpose, they don't have it. This is all it is. Now, whereas the human has the capacity to understand the difference from the simple calculations to the highest, subtlest calculations that a person does in the field of nuclear physics or in the field of economics, science, arts, all the distinctions, wherever you understand the difference. This is Shankarabharanam, this is Kalyani. That ability to distinguish between the two types of ragas. This is Kalyani raga, this is Todi, this is Mohanam. That ability to distinguish. That's about it. Not saying which is better, which is higher, which is lower. Remember, we're not talking about, that just because that word is to be recognized very carefully here. We are studying philosophy. Remember that. The subject, what we are discussing is philosophy. In politics, discrimination is a wrong word. Okay? You should not discriminate. That is politics. Politically, you should not use. There, it has a different connotation. Now, here we are having a different connotation to that word. We are just using that word. I understand this is different from that. That is called discrimination. We are not saying which is better. We are not coming to any sort of conclusions. You are seeing both. That's all. You register both and say this different from that. That's called buddhi. That discriminating power, when it is engaged within the terrestrial world, that is called gross intellect. When you are engaging that same discrimination beyond the terrestrial and say, and posit and conceive something beyond and say that versus this, that is different from this. When you start thinking, when you engage your thinking capacity, inquiring process, intellect is just a sheer process of inquiry. That's about it. Conclusions can be anything. We don't care. Because the conclusions will depend upon the necessary informations that you have to process, plus your intellectual strength, the strength of your intellect. So conclusion is not what we are talking here. We are discussing only with reference to what is being done. It is inquiry. You investigate. The process of investigation is called intellect. When you do that investigation within the world, it is called as gross intellect. When you start thinking in terms of what is real, what is unreal, what is terrestrial, what is transcendental, what is truth, what is false, what is the reality. When you start probing into those things, that is where it is referred as subtle intellect, sukshma buddhi. They may say, sir, why it is called as subtle? Why this is called as subtle intellect? Isn't it? Now, because for all of us, a nuclear physicist will look far more superior to a person engaging in the study of Vedanta. Isn't it? Nobel laureate, when a person comes, we'll say what? By virtue of your engagement, employing your thinking within the terrestrial world, you are using gross intellect, full stop. But here we will say subtle intellect. Is it only for the superiority? You wanted to prove that those who are studying my subject are greater. Therefore, it is. No, there is a reason for it. Why this is called as subtle is because in the discrimination, when you are employing within the world, you know both. This is square, this is circle. A square is different from a circle. You know both. When you come to the thinking with reference to the self, you know world, you don't know the transcendental. The terrestrial world, one half of it we know. The other half of it is totally unknown to you. Whereas when you are engaging your intellect within the world, you know two things. You know both. There, you know only one side, you don't know the other side completely. Yet, you probe into it. That is why it is called as subtle intellect. Now, people think, why this is called as subtle? You should know the reason for calling these things as the names they have given has a reason. It's not just, being given at random. The gross intellect is because it knows both. It knows the world. It understands what is there. And then it probes into it. Whereas you come to the engagement of the subtle intellect, when the discrimination is going beyond the terrestrial, you have no clue of what is the transcendental. Therefore, it is called as subtle intellect. Now he says, there is a personality. What is your personality, sir? A human is a hyphenated personality, he says. You see that? The next one. This the self functioning through the body, you take the position of a perceiver, an actor. The grossest aspect of your personality is the actor. Organs of action is gross. Organs of perception, subtle. Both belong to body only. But in the body, there is a hierarchy they have. Organs of action and organs of perception. Karmendriyas and Jnanendriyas. Jnanendriyas are subtle, Karmendriyas are grosser. So when you are engaging the body through the organs of perception, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, you are called as a perceiver. When you are engaging your organs of action, you are called as an actor. When the same consciousness, the self, functions through the mind, you become the feeler. That's the emotional personality. When that consciousness functions through the gross intellect, you are called a thinker, intellectual personality. When consciousness functions through the subtle intellect, you take a position of a contemplator, that is referred as spiritual personality. So, a human being is a hyphenated personality of actor, perceiver, feeler, thinker, contemplator. Referred as physical personality, emotional personality, intellectual personality, spiritual personality. So a human being has got all these four personality layers together. So whenever we refer to a human, that human has all these four: physical personality, emotional personality, intellectual personality, spiritual personality. Now, this human being, the essential aspect of a human personality starts from the self. This Atman, the self, is that one homogeneous conscious principle, pure conscious principle. That conscious principle, he starts explaining. Next, earlier he had indicated through three reasoning. There has to be something beyond matter. He was not narrating what it is. That is a difference. We have seen that in the last class. What is Atman? How did we come to conclusion there is this spirit component? What is the proof? What is the logic for it? Even though there is no direct proof, we had a lot of pointers. We have given a lot of indications leading to definite possibility of existence of something like that. We have seen that in the last class. Now what he is doing is, now he starts narrating, explaining, indicating what is that Atman? What is that pure consciousness? Now that pure consciousness is referred, not defined, because it cannot be defined, referred. Now comes the catch. Now here what is going to be moving, what is going to be happening now is, he has just now introduced subtle intellect. Right? Now the subtle intellect's engagement, subtle intellect starts probing, starts inquiring into what? What is the job of a subtle intellect? What is it going to do in you? How it is going to be functioning in you is what the paragraph is all about, 162. Now, anytime you wanted to think, engage your subtle intellect, you have to come to this page and read that paragraph. If you are really inspired, hooked onto it, you know you have got a very strong subtle intellect. Or else your subtle intellect is too weak. Now the employment, that is why suddenly we may be wondering why he is switching over to explaining Atman now. Suddenly, you said, body is there, mind is there, action, perceiver, feeler, thinker, contemplator, all that you have explained. Now, why is he suddenly switching back to explaining the self again? Because he has to be indicating what is the role of a subtle intellect in a human being. In fact, throughout Vedanta, when we say intellect, you got to take it for granted that is subtle intellect that we refer to as intellect. It's not the gross intellect. Right? We say you have to follow your intellect. When we say you should be following the subtle intellect. What is this subtle intellect do, sir? Your subtle intellect could be weak, the subtle intellect could be strong. Remember that. Right? Exactly like your gross intellect can be strong, the gross intellect can be weak. Isn't it? We say it's a faculty, it's the power of thinking. When we say it could be. So when we say you have got a very weak subtle intellect, what does it mean? Now it's very easy for all of us to understand what is the meaning of a weak gross intellect. When you have a gross intellect weak, what do you understand then? The mathematics you start teaching, I can't follow what you are talking. I can't follow reasoning. I can't follow the sequence of thoughts, precise thinking. A, B, C, D. No, we can't move like that. We have to keep making statements. That's about it. We can't follow. I cannot be sequential in my thought pattern. What are we going to be speaking? Why should I speak whatever I'm speaking? What is the context? Isn't it? Like you can't go to a doctor and start discussing about the architectural beauty of Taj Mahal. And the doctor is keeping your MRI report. And he is waiting to get a chance from you to tell you that you have got cancer 4th stage. Now you are describing with him. And he is trying to tell you are having cancer. And I tell you, that we'll discuss later, doctor. First, let us clear, how beautiful Taj Mahal is. What is the greatness of Taj Mahal? Why it is fantastic? It's not the context, you see. Unless you are going to be having a party. In a party, when you are meeting that same doctor, there what you do? This is called intellect. You discuss things with reference to the context. The capacity to have it will vary from strong and weak. When we say human beings have got a very weak subtle intellect, you might have been having a very strong gross intellect, but you lack the strength Your subtle intellect lacks the strength. What does it mean, sir? Very easy to recognize. What is the strength of your subtle intellect? Right. We will close the class at 8 o'clock. Right. After 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock, right? See how many times you are able to remember there is God. Assumption only. I'm not saying, I'm not giving you any proof or anything, please. I'm just stating a thought. Just keep the thought, retain the thought consciously. If you can retain the thought consciously for 1 hour and see how many times, how long you are able to hold. Not sitting in a corner, not doing anything else. No. Go about doing your routine work. Have your dinner. But your thought should be what? There is God. Just the thought. Or if you want, a better thought is this. This is what, Vasishta says. Yoga Vasishta. Rama, assume that you are Brahman and live. Says, problem solved. Assume that you are God. Assumption only. Why? Because right now you have assumed that you are this personality, isn't it? You are a human being. It's an assumption. Instead of assuming like this, why can't you assume like that? Why miserliness in assumption? In the dream, have a grand dream. No. Why do you want to have? My dream is to have. Yesterday night I had a fantastic dream. What's the dream, sir? I was living in a triple bedroom apartment. I say, why do you want to dream like that? It's a dream, man. Have. Entire United States I purchased. I bought the country. There are a few places, they sell. Islands they sell. Like that. Nobody is going to sell. But you say what? I went and door to door. I asked everyone to sell that property of theirs. How much? Give it to me. I pay you. I paid. Bought the entire country. Why entire country, man? That is also small. Say whole earth, no? I bought the entire earth. It belongs to me. Say no. Dream, man. Just try to see how much you can maintain that thought that I am God. There is God. Forget about I am God also. There is God. There is Brahman. There is that supreme reality. The retention we can't have. That is called the power of your subtle intellect. You have a powerful subtle intellect, means you retain the thought constantly. This is real, this is unreal. This is unreal, that is real. Not concluding anything. This is different, that is different. The capacity to conceive something beyond the terrestrial experience. The world, when we say terrestrial, when we say all that is known to you, that's called world. Remember, whenever we use the word world in Vedanta, what is referred is all that you know of, all that you can experience, all that is possible to be experienced by the human faculties. It might not have been experienced by that one individual. That's not our point. The point is what? Say, for example, some of you might not have seen, experienced, what is this? Mummies. Egypt, pyramids. I am not saying pyramid. There are a lot of people we know. About 2 generations or 3 generations back in your own family, you go and ask. Those people would have been born in that village, brought up in that village, they get educated in the village, get married, and live and die. Never crossed beyond the boundary of the village. 3 generations back in your own house. You see, now that doesn't mean those things didn't exist. You see, world, you say terrestrial, means all that is known to you, experienced by you, experientiable by you. That which can be experienced by you is terrestrial. The transcendental is to conceive of something beyond all the possibility of experience. Immediately we say what? Experienced by what? Experienced by. That is where it starts probing and seeing if there is a terrestrial thing, there has to be the transcendental. Then how do you prove it, sir? Gives a beautiful example. Says the sun is there, and there is lot of varieties we are seeing because of the difference in the reflecting surface. And the reflected sun takes the properties of the reflecting medium. The fact that there is a reflected sun is the proof there has to be original sun. Isn't it? Now, probing into rejecting the reflected sun and probing into inquiring, finding out the original sun is what subtle intellect's job is all about. So that's why they give this example of the sun and this. The sun is the original, the pure consciousness. The reflected sun is the conditioned consciousness. All the consciousness that is known to us is all conditioned consciousness. We don't know pure consciousness, consciousness without conditioned, without restricted, without objectified. This is what Jiddu Krishnamurti says, objectless awareness, he says. What is this? He says, all awareness are objectful. I am conscious of the rain. It's raining outside now. I am conscious of the rain. I am aware of what? I know. You know what? I know. You say, know what? Your knowledge is conditioned. Your awareness is conditioned. Your consciousness is conditioned. So all the consciousness that is known to us is conditioned consciousness. Delete the conditionings. What remains is the pure consciousness. And I am constricted. I feel that I am limited. I am restricted because of the conditionings. What is conditioning the whole thing, sir? The body, mind, and intellect is what is conditioning the whole thing. So what I have to do now, I have to use the same body, mind, and intellect, which is conditioning me to get involved in the world, lose sight of that consciousness. I have to use that same thing to get out. It's the same key which locks the lock which unlocks the lock. You can't have two different keys, isn't it? The key is the same thing. If you use that key in a particular way, it locks the lock. You use the key in a particular way, it unlocks the lock. Now, using the key in a particular way to unlock the conditioning is called spiritual. In that, we have to engage what we are equipped with. What are we equipped with? We are all equipped with three things: body, mind, intellect. In that body, mind, and intellect, we have already seen body has two aspects: perceiver, actor. Mind is only one, feeler. Intellect has two aspects: gross intellect, subtle intellect. Now here, the key doesn't lie at the stage of the perceiver. It is not in the hands of the actor. It is not in the hands of the feeler. It is not in the hands of the thinker. The key to unlock the lock is with the contemplator only. So when you are using that contemplator and asking these three fellows to toe line with that contemplator, the other fellows, the perceiver, actor, feeler, thinker, four of them. I said three. Four of them. That four aspects of your personality should toe line with the contemplator. The three personalities, the physical personality, emotional personality, and intellectual personality, should toe line with the spiritual personality. When they come in alignment to the spiritual personality, there comes evolution. There comes liberation. That is where you actually reach that state of realization, enlightenment. The process is referred as three disciplines because of three personalities: physical personality, emotional personality, and intellectual personality. All these three should come under the guidance of the spiritual personality, which means under the guidance of the subtle intellect. Without the guidance of the subtle intellect, if they were to be functioning, you are more and more getting entangled in the world. The perceiver keeps perceiving things without reference to the contemplator. Actor performing actions without reference to the contemplator. Feeler keeps feeling without reference to the contemplator. Thinker keeps thinking without reference to the contemplator. If they are not functioning with the consultation of him, under the guidance of him, when they function under the guidance, that is where the same physical personality's operations gets transformed into karma yoga. The same operations performed by the emotional personality becomes bhakti yoga, a spiritual discipline. You are transacting. See, what is getting transacted is the mind only. What is getting transacted in karma yoga is body only. What is getting transacted when you are using thinking? Right now, you are engaging your thinking. You are trying to follow what I am speaking. However, logical or illogical, it doesn't matter. But you are trying to follow. That is thinking. That's focus. You are trying to understand the difference and trying to probe, inquire. Which one you are using? Where all this is happening, sir? Within the world only. But when the same discussion were to be happening, keeping the backdrop, reference point of the subtle intellect, then only this act of the philosophy discussion becomes spiritual. Otherwise, it's a good intellectual entertainment. That's about it. There's no big difference. Now, there are people who play golf and they get a kick out of it. You attend Vedanta class and you get a kick out of it. There is no difference. You see, one fellow goes to pub. There is a dance. They keep jumping. They jump and they come back. Now, you go to bhajan. What are you doing there? Same jumping only. There's no difference. The music is different there, therefore the movements will be different. The music is different here, therefore the movements also will be different. Then, where this becomes spiritual? Remember, the problem we have is, we think the action becomes spiritual depending upon the field of action. It's not the field. Then what is it, sir? Wherever you are, whatever you do, that can be converted into spiritual, that can be converted into mundane. Then who decides that, sir? What is deciding? Which is the deciding factor? The decisive factor is the subtle intellect. If this class were to be happening, keeping the subtle intellect as the reference point, then this class is spiritual. When you are performing actions, there may be another person who is doing a business, keeping the reference point of the subtle intellect, keeping the thought that there is the reality. All that I am doing is unreal. This is unreal, that is real. This is unreal, that is real. That discrimination is constantly kept alert and alive. And then he is going about doing his business. That man's action is spiritual. He may not be talking on Vedanta. He may not be discussing, philosophy, spiritual, religion, God, all those things. He'll be discussing only in terms of share, cash flow, legal problems, negotiations, hardcore negotiations happening in terms of how are we to strike a balance. All that is going on. But that action, Vedanta will call as spiritual. Why? Because that has the backing of the subtle intellect. Remember this. When you are using the gross intellect, when you are using the mind, when you are using the body, physical personality, this physical personality, Karma Yoga has two aspects: engaging the organs of action, or you can be engaging the organs of perception. That is where we have in the Bhagavad Gita, two chapters are there. Chapter 3 and chapter 4. In chapter 3, Krishna explains how you can use the organs of action adapted to Karma Yoga, and how you can use the organs of perception and adapted to Karma Yoga is the fourth chapter. So if I have to explain Karma Yoga, I have to explain chapter 3 and chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. So don't expect me to explain all that now. Okay. If you want to know, you can go there and read. Similarly, Bhakti Yoga is the discipline of the mind. Discipline means what? There has to be a parameter. When I function within that parameter, I am disciplined. I will eat this. I will eat this much. I will not eat more than that. That's called discipline. That's why animals are all disciplined, you say. Not by choice, Okay, but they are disciplined because no animal will overeat. Just because we have ordered, just because it is tastier, I will not say I have one more roti. Why? It is so tasty. One more pizza I will not eat. Animals will not eat. Humans will do it. Like my grandmother used to say, very little only is there. Finish it. I say, what? Finish means what? Put it, last bit, she will say, that little is enough for three people to eat. That is little for her. Three fellows can have. And she will say, little only is there. You know, mostly my sister and brother only they will get caught. I will escape. Because I know what she will do. So I quickly finish my dinner and get up and leave before they finish. These two will be last one to be sitting there. I'll say, finish it. What finish? That's why obeys. Somebody was telling me there's about in US they're saying it seems about 83% of them seems to be obese. I don't know whether it is true. I wish it is a false information. But if it were to be somewhere closer, anything more than about 5 to 6% obese is something to be concerned about. Imagine 70% or 83% he says people are obese. Why? Because no animal will overeat. You see, when you say that I'm disciplined in my eating, that means what? I have a parameter. Now, I will not entertain emotions. I will not engage my thinking. Parameter is what? What is a parameter? That fixation was given by the subtle intellect. That is where the subtle intellect's power, subtle intellect's requirement is very important. You see, without the presence of a subtle intellect, you are doomed. Human beings are doomed. Human cannot survive. It's like, imagine a tiger were not to have its claws. What will happen to that? If a duck were to be born without its web feet, what will happen? If the deer were to be deaf, what will happen? It should have that sharp hearing capacity. Only then it can survive. Otherwise, it cannot survive. Human beings devoid of subtle intellect, doomed for destruction. And human society, human species is in real trouble today. I'm not referring to Corona, please. Is in great danger. Why? Because the subtle intellect is given to us as a potential. You see, we need to cultivate it. Nature will give everything as a potential. Now we need to build it like muscle. We are born with the set of muscles that is required. But then we need to exercise it. We need nourishment and exercise, engagement of it to build it, to keep it alert and alive. If there is no nourishment or engagement exercise, the muscles will get weaker and weaker and weaker and die. Same way, human being is given this potential form. That's about it. This inquiry aspect, which ought to be the guiding factor, has fallen. That is why they recommend the first book to be read in our syllabus. We say, read that book, The Fall of the Human Intellect. What is that intellect that has fallen? This is the fall. The intellect which is falling, which means that inquiry aspect which needs to be guiding. The guidance has fallen. If the guide has fallen, what will happen? So in the scriptures, they give a beautiful example in this Kathopanishad. It it describes the human personality to the chariot. It says, beautiful comparison. They say, Yama says, human being is like a chariot. He says, the horses mounted to the chariot is the senses. The reins is the mind. Mind one, intellect one, gross intellect. Reins has two strings, you see. One is mind, one is gross intellect. Those two should be held firmly by the charioteer, represented by Krishna. Krishna represents that, the subtle intellect. Krishna is a representation of the subtle intellect in us. And the jiva, the individual, is the traveler. That individual can reach his desired destination only if the charioteer has a complete control over the reins and the horses. If the charioteer were to lose his grip on the reins, then the horses will run helter-skelter and cause damage, destruction. Now, human life has become like that now. Why? There is no charioteer. There is no driver in the car. And you don't know how to drive. And you are having a Ferrari with you. What is the point? If people can come and see, you can show them, that's about it. Now, what is the point of having all this? So much of effort we have put in to take birth as a human. It's a rare opportunity. Shankara explains that in the Vivek Chudamani. How rare it is to get an opportunity to be born as a human. Now, having taken birth as a human, you are given this great capacity to think, to probe, to inquire, and try to understand that consciousness and get back to the position of consciousness. Instead of that, you are doing everything else, he says. Why? Because the subtle intellect is not developed. The subtle intellect is not exercised. So whenever we say intellect, spiritual, the spiritual program, spiritual discipline, spiritual path, spirituality, it means only one thing. What does it say? Strengthening your subtle intellect. If you are not engaging your subtle intellect, there is no point in developing anything. The engagement of subtle intellect is the crux of the whole thing. So your human personality hinges where now? Yes. The vasanas is the problem there. Now, these vasanas have come in and camouflages the whole thing. But in and through all that, you are given an opportunity. You are given a chance. There is a great opportunity we have to wriggle out of this unnecessary entanglement, engagement with the affairs of the body, mind, and intellect. Get out of this conditioning and decondition ourselves. To decondition you, what is required is the subtle intellect, which is given to you already. You see, they have locked you up and he has given the keys for the lock to you. The policeman. What a fantastic policeman that must be. the prison authorities. They have imprisoned you. Why? Because you made a mistake. And then he says, I imprisoned you, I'll put you in the jail, but I'll lock you up and then give the keys to you. And he goes. This is the charitable attitude of the Lord. The grace of God, we say. What is the grace? The grace is what? He has put you in the jail, no doubt about it. Yes, you are entangled, you are conditioned. You can't live with that pure consciousness. You recognize only this body, mind, intellect, and you are stuck in this world. The problem is you should recognize that you are stuck. The problem for most of us is we don't even recognize that you are in the prison. You think you are at home. Now what to do? Why? Because all your relatives are there. Right? Everybody is there. Now what you will think? So we say, a tiger in a cage, a caged tiger, you take him and put him in a zoo, he will think that is liberation, that is freedom. You see? Now, inside the zoo also, what is he? That's not a real tiger. You see, the real tiger doesn't belong to zoo. The tiger belongs to the jungle. You take that fellow and put him in jungle and come back. These tigers, from the zoo, you take them and put them in jungle, they will die. Like the pets that we have, the dogs. You take the dog and leave it on the street and go away, it will die. It will not know how to live. It cannot survive there. In fact, they belong to that place. They belong to be left alone. We bring them inside our house and we train them. In the training, we make them different from what they are supposed to be. You see, it's a great disservice for your selfish, your incapacitation to relate to a fellow human being. You bring in that animal and convert it from what it is supposed to be and make it. I say, what? And then we say we are all great lovers of it. No lover. You change the fellow and you deny him from what he is supposed to be and make him live like this. So you may ask me, how do you know Ishvara? You take your pet and you leave him in one side of the road. You go to the other side and call him, come. Domesticated dog will not know how to cross the road. The street dog knows how to cross the road. They know how to live. It's not, they don't need you, actually. It is we who need them. I say, who is superior? Love is to do what, sir? To give freedom. The problem is what? We believed moving from a cage to a zoo is freedom. That's not freedom, please. That's not liberation. Moving from here to there is not liberation. What is it, sir? In a very philosophical language, we'll say what? From the world you go to heaven. Now, does it mean you are any better, please? It's the same problem only. That's what one fellow said. All of you go to heaven. One boy said, I don't want. He didn't raise his hand. Everybody in the classroom, raised their hand. Only this one boy didn't raise this hand. The priest asked, why you don't want to go to heaven? I don't want to go to heaven. They said, why you don't want? Why my child, you don't want to go to heaven? Because all these fellows are going to be there also. All these guys have raised their hands, they will want to go to heaven. And if these fellows are going to be there, I don't want that heaven, he says. If you are going to come to heaven, I also come to heaven. We rather live here itself. Why go there? No big difference. Of course, there is a difference. What is the difference, sir? Cage is 8 by 10, right? Or 10 by 10 square feet. But the zoo is 1.5 kilometers, or 2 kilometers, or 200 kilometers. Whatever you keep, you see, there is a boundary. He cannot come beyond that. Whatever is left there, you see, he can't choose. In a jungle, a tiger decides its territory. He decides. Now, the grace of the Lord is the gift is this, the gift of subtle intellect. Exercise that subtle intellect, engage that subtle intellect, nourish and nurture the subtle intellect. That nourishment and nurturing of the subtle intellect is called spiritual. So when we say he is a very spiritual person, means he should be having a very strong subtle intellect. Not because he is doing very good pranayama and yoga. You think if a fellow bends, left, right, center. I said that is gymnastics. A fellow starts crying. Ooh, he keeps crying. You call him as a bhakta. That is not. Another fellow does a fascinating analysis, a splitting analysis on what is the difference between Shankara and Madhva, Ramanuja, Bodhayana, this fellow, that fellow, all that. You think he is a very spiritual person. Spirituality is not a station, it's not a position. Then what defines the spiritual person, sir? The strength of his subtle intellect. What have you done to strengthen your subtle intellect? Once your subtle intellect gets its strength, nothing we have to do after that. Automatically, these three fellows will start following him. That's the beauty here. Remember this. I may say, Ishwaran, subtle intellect we develop, that's all we have to do. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. But you only said, no, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, and all those things. Yes, all those things will happen automatic. Once you have a strong discrimination, this is real, this is unreal. Nitya, Anitya, Viveka, Vicharam says. What is this intellect? Intellect means this, the capacity to inquire into what is this and what is that. At least you must have the capacity to suspect, is this real? That's all. That holding to that thought, is this real? Is this all? Or is there anything beyond? If it is not all, then what are we doing? Retention of this thought defines the strength of your subtle intellect. That is what I meant in the earlier, as casually said, just retain the thought of God. What is the retain? There is God, there is God, there is God. Not a mechanical repetition, please. Even then, it works. Even mechanical repetition also is not possible by you. You can try that. That is what I'm saying. We will say mechanically. I say first try to do mechanically. Even that is not possible. Why? Because subtle intellect is so weak today. The engagement of the subtle intellect, the development of subtle intellect comes only when you start studying the scriptures, probing into what is real and what is unreal. Through that, the charioteer knows exactly where to pull, where to say, go, keeps driving the chariot, and you reach the destination. If the charioteer is weak, or if the charioteer falls off to sleep, you are finished. The horses will run in all directions. It will not go. You will definitely meet with accident. If the driver goes to sleep, what will happen? Today, chariot may not be there. But if imagine the driver goes to sleep, and whole life we are driving fast asleep. If accidents had not happened, divinity that shapes our ends. See you next class. Thank you.